end all military aid to Ukraine immediately. The United States suspends it all, period. Not to be reconsidered, reevaluated later, period. It's over. We stop all aid to Ukraine, number one. Number two, we get all of our people out of Ukraine, all of our forces, whatever is in there that is American, leaves. And if we do that, the rest of the NATO allies will follow suit very quickly. That's clear and unambiguous to the Russians that we're serious. At that point, I think the Russians would consider any number of things, but that's critical to meeting their conditions. The concern in Russia is that at every turn, this regime in Kiev, with its radical neo-Nazi backers, will look for every opportunity to resume fighting. And therefore, what is the point of a ceasefire if it's simply going to be treated as rest, refit, reorganize so that you can come back again and threaten Russia? It's that simple. And I don't know how you get around that. If I were a Russian, I would take the same position.
Well, so let's look at the part of this calculation. They have been saying that clip that I showed you there from December, both Putin and Lavrov, Sergei Ryabkov has reinforced that. We actually had Larry Johnson on the show, I think it was yesterday or day before, where he physically went to Moscow along with Judge Knapp, and they actually had a meeting with Sergei Lavrov. And that was the one thing he said they really emphasized to him, was that they were still not interested in a ceasefire. And that was actually before that. The meeting they had with him was right before it had been agreed in Jeddah that the Ukraine side would agree to that. So one just has to wonder what is the next step there, and what will the Russians do if the Steve Witkoff apparently is heading that direction right now. When he gets in meets with Putin, is Putin just going to say, I hear you, but y'all don't seem to be hearing me? How do you think that meeting's going to go?
I don't think it's going to go anywhere. If we insist on an immediate ceasefire and say, well, the Ukrainians are willing to ceasefire, well, of course, Ukrainians' backs are up against the wall. The regime in Kiev is on its last legs. There's no question about that. But as long as they are receiving aid from us, as long as we are still on the ground in Ukraine, providing the intelligence, the technical expertise, whatever is required to sustain these long-range strikes against Russia, the Ukrainians are going to continue. There is no evidence for any good faith on the Ukrainian side whatsoever. And I think that's what Lavrov and Putin are saying. So again, we're the ones that created this war. Without us, there would have been no Ukraine war. We are the ones that staged this coup and installed a government that otherwise would not have come to power. We are the ones that subsidized the building and structuring of a Ukrainian force that had one purpose and only one purpose: to attack Russia, to retake Crimea, but to march into Russia. This was a machine that was fueled with more than money and cash and technology. It was fueled with hatred on a scale that we haven't seen for decades. That's all unacceptable. If we signal that that's over, we make it very clear that we've had it with that. We will not subsidize that anymore. And that's something that President Trump can do easily because he was never part of it. The longer he waits, with each passing day that we dither and refuse to take decisive action, cut the aid, pull everybody out, the more and more this looks like President Trump's war. And that's not a good thing. It's a drain on our resources, time and effort, and it still has the potential to expand. That's what's most disturbing. So we really need to stop it. How do you stop it? Stop the aid to Ukraine, pull us all out, and then talk to the Russians. Right now, we have not demonstrated that we're willing to do anything. We're instead acting as though we're the victors strategically in this conflict. We're not. Neither is Ukraine. And we're trying to dictate the outcome to Moscow. It's not going to work, Dan.
So what could the administration do? What's the best thing they could do right now to get the maximum benefit for the United States that won't undermine, I guess, our diplomatic credibility elsewhere? For example, many people are already saying, if you don't agree to this ceasefire, talking about the United States, if you don't get Russia to agree to this ceasefire, then you, quote, have to keep supporting Ukraine. Otherwise, you will be abandoning them and handing over to Putin a victory. How do you respond to that?
Russia has already claimed victory in eastern Ukraine. It's theirs. They hold the initiative. They can move strategically in any number of different directions. We talked before about the concentrations of force in eastern Ukraine, down in Kherson, all the way to Zaporizhia, and up north in and around Kharkov. They can move as they wish at Putin's command. And there's nothing that we can do about it unless we want to declare war on Russia. I don't think we do. I don't think anybody's interested in that. So the notion that if we don't get X, then we have to support this is ridiculous. We don't have to support this at all. We shouldn't support it. We should never have supported it. And that was Trump's brilliant opportunity to step forward and say, I have no interest in subverting Russia. I have no interest in destroying Russia. I have no interest in using Ukrainian lives, blood, and treasure, even though they've got none, to destroy Russia. That's not my goal. My goal is peace. So the first step in that direction is cut the aid and pull us out. Get us out of there completely. And the other Europeans will then subsequently follow. That's tangible. That's real. You do that, and the Russians are going to say, well, I guess they're serious. They really want to stop this war. And then you sit down and you negotiate. And I think it could be done. But the way we're approaching this, it's becoming it's got to be a win for me. If I can't get a win out of this, if I don't look like I'm winning, then I can't do it. Well, this is a situation in which we're not winners, and we're not going to be winners, and the Ukrainians are certainly losers. There's no question about that. We ought to be more magnanimous. Remember when Teddy Roosevelt negotiated an end to the Russo-Japanese War, the Japanese wanted far more control over Manchuria and much of eastern Siberia than the Russians were prepared to give. And President Roosevelt said, look, you've won. The Russians concede. You have won the battlefield victories. Now you can afford to be magnanimous and generous. Don't demand too much. And I think I can get you most of what you want. That's exactly what happened. And the war ended, and it didn't break out again until really 1939. So the point is, there's a way to do this, but we're not approaching it reasonably. We're trying to take the position that, well, we're the United States, we're the great hegemon, and you've got to do these things or we won't play. The Russians are going to say, fine, then we're not playing. And they will continue to move in whatever direction they want to secure whatever it is on the ground that they want.
Now, let me ask you a question on in terms of the Russian military capacity. So there has been this view in the West for really all of the last full 12 months, more than that, probably 14 months, toward the end of 2023, that Russia, yes, they've been moving along to the west. They've been taking territory, but it's relatively short. It's relatively small because that's all they can do. That's the best that they can get done. And then we've seen from, I think it was the 8th of March up until just last time I checked earlier today, there has been a dramatic shift in the Kursk area where it appears that Russia just made an operational decision that they're going to now close off the Kursk pocket. Now they call it the Suja pocket. And they had just moved huge numbers of kilometers, of square kilometers every single day. And now then it could literally be expunged within 2 to 3 more days here. Is that indicative of what Russia could do elsewhere, or do you think that was unique to the Kursk area?
Well, first, we need to admit that in this Kursk Oblast, there's almost nobody there. Very few people live there. You're talking about vast stretches, hundreds of square miles of forest, dense forest. There aren't very many improved roads. So the only people that were there that were fighting were obviously Ukrainian or mercenaries that were fighting for the Ukrainians. They've decided to put an end to it. I think that's the way it should be viewed. And I think as soon as they do it, they'll be ready to move on in new directions. I don't think we should apply that everywhere. What takes 1 or 2 days in Kursk might take a week elsewhere. It depends on the density of force and the nature of the terrain. That terrain was open and largely empty. That's not the case as you move west in Ukraine. I think the bottom line is the Russians can do pretty much what they want. Pretending that the Russians are somehow or another incapable doesn't do any good. I mean, we got to stop this nonsense of pretending that we are somehow or another innately superior to everybody else. That's ridiculous. You know, I don't think the U.S. forces right now could have gone 100 kilometers without falling all over themselves. and sustaining themselves logistically. You know that from your own experience. We're not built to do it. We're not organized to do it. We were much better 30 years ago than we are now. And it really wasn't that good 30 years ago. We were just facing an enemy that didn't have the opportunity to launch deep strikes that could have had a profound impact on us. So I think all that crap needs to go away. We need to stop talking about that. And eventually the Russians are going to say what they've always said to people when they come to the negotiating table: put up or shut up. What is it that you're going to put up? If you refuse to do X, Y, and Z, show us. And I don't think we're prepared to do that at all.